So let's start the show. It's 5 o'clock. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Hi. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm Carolyn, the Los Angeles Executive Director of United Hatzalah. We have an amazing program in store for all of you tonight that will last about an hour. Before we start our program, I first wanted to introduce you to Michael Masters, the National Director and CEO of Secure Community Network, the National Homeland Security Initiative of the Jewish Federations of North America. Please join me as we welcome Michael, who will be sharing a few words with us regarding the extra security measures we took for tonight's program.
Take a look at this. This is what you're going to want to talk about.
Thank you, Carolyn. As Carolyn mentioned, I serve as the National Director and CEO of the Secure Community Network. Like Hatzalah, SCN is a nonprofit organization that is at base dedicated to saving and protecting Jewish lives. And our goal is simple. Just as Israel has an Iron Dome to keep it safe, we're working to build a security shield over the Jewish community here. And before I discuss that security situation, I would be remiss if I didn't convey on behalf of the team at SCN our best wishes to Eli on his ongoing recovery. He's a real guardian of the people, and we need him strong. So I'm delighted to see him and hear how well you're doing. So. Let me contextualize, obviously, the steps that have been taken tonight. We have seen an incredible uptick in cybersecurity events, and particularly Zoom bombing, as has impacted past events across the Jewish community, as well as the private sector, public and academic sectors, and of course, a previous event that you held. But I want to contextualize that in the overarching security situation that our community is facing. And really, prior to this global pandemic, conditions facing the Jewish community in the United States were already of grave concern. 58% of religiously motivated hate crimes in our country were directed at the Jewish community, the highest level in decades. And as the community's official liaison with federal law enforcement, and prior to the pandemic, we work on a daily basis with the FBI to assess the security situation facing our community. And what we assessed was that we were facing the most dynamic and complex threat environment in the history of this country and directed at our community. And while some of this may be related to increased reporting when we look at those hate crime statistics, we know the actual reality of this hate. Since October 2018, we've experienced 4 deadly attacks on our community. And while COVID-19 has closed many of our facilities, it really hasn't stopped those who hate us or wish to harm us. Indeed, this current environment, we've seen a rise in online hate and anti-Semitism, and we've seen the deployment of strategy into new mediums like Zoom bombing. Since the initial outbreak of COVID-19, our 24/7 operations center, which is staffed by a team of intelligence analysts, has been monitoring communications in a variety of online forums, from conspiracy theories blaming Jews for COVID-19 to encouraging its use as a bioweapon against our community. These threats are real. Our partners at the FBI have arrested near record levels of domestic terrorism suspects since the beginning of 2020. Close to 24 individuals have been arrested for plotting attacks on our Jewish institutions since October 2018. And as I said, no space is truly safe. We've seen an uptick in cyber attacks, harassment, and crime. So some of the measures that you're seeing here tonight, for instance, conducting this as a webinar, requiring participant registration, the use of a waiting room. All of these are now standard security protocols that we're implementing when we're having online forums such as this one. But even then, nothing is foolproof, and we have to continually work. We've, working with federal law enforcement, we've identified both individuals and groups that are seeking to exploit the current pandemic to incite anti-Semitism, encourage violence, and often in cyberspace, just really cause a disruption within our community, our own sense of stability in what are now really sacred spaces for us, as we can't gather in synagogues and we conduct services online. The disruption to those has real psychological impact. All of this means that as our organizations open virtually or reopen physically, we need to be more committed to safety and security. We're not going to choose the time and place of the next incident, but there's much we can do to be safer and more secure. Some of that is the online protocols that you saw today. Other parts of it are in the work that we do every day. We have an incredible network of Jewish community security directors around this country, law enforcement, intelligence, military, security professionals who are implementing life-saving training, physical security, best practice policies and procedures. Reach out to them, connect with them, whether it's related to your physical safety and security of your institution, or most critically for your own training. And when an incident happens, please report it to law enforcement, We've worked with United Hatzalah over the last few weeks on the event that happened here. And I want to thank some of the people on the phone call who were instrumental in that or in the webinar. And we're going to continue doing so. Every time we report an incident like this, and we work with law enforcement, we build that relationship up and we have a better opportunity to prevent these types of attacks happening in the future. And just as we do with fire drills in this country, we need to be consistent and uniform how we do that. And I'd also say in your personal lives, given the unrest that we're seeing around the world, what training do you have? Are you situationally aware? When walking down the street, is your face buried in your phone? If an incident occurs, you know what exits to use. As any of the members who have trained with Hatzalah know, we don't raise to the occasion, we fall back to our level of training. It's a bad time to try to put on a tourniquet or render first aid when you're responding to an emergency call, and the same is true with our personal safety and security. We have to commit to action. Together, we're doing that, SCN, United Hatzalah, and we look forward to continuing to partner with all of you to do that as well. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael. With your help, we were able to provide added security to our virtual event tonight. Tonight's talk on anti-Semitism is a much needed discussion that needs to be taking place. With added security, it is possible. I would like to begin our program for the evening. First, we will hear a few words from our co-hosts, Leah and Sam Yebri, and Shannon and Jacob Zackary. Next, we will hear an update on COVID in Israel and the beautiful work United Hatzalah is doing to help rescue lives from our special guest, United Hatzalah founder, Eli Beer. We will then hear a discussion from our experts, David Suissa and Lisa Daftari, on the rise of anti-Semitism in 2020. We will open up the discussion with question and answer led by Jacob for 15 minutes. If you have any questions for our experts, please type it in the chat log and we will try our best to get to it. We will then wrap up the program and I will let you know of a very exciting upcoming event United Hatzalah is having and how to get more involved. So without further ado, please welcome our first co-hosts, Leah and Sam Yebri.
Hi everyone, it is a pleasure to be with you. When Carolyn asked us to host, we could not say no, both because fighting anti-Semitism is such an important and timely issue, and because United Hatzalah is a wonderful organization that saves lives every day. Israel is so close to our hearts, and supporting United Hatzalah is one way for all of us to show our love for Israel and to help our Israeli brothers and sisters.
United Hatzalah of Israel is the largest independent nonprofit, fully volunteer emergency medical service organization providing fast and free emergency medical first response throughout Israel. United Hatzalah service is available to all people regardless of race, religion, or national origin. United Hatzalah has more than 6,000 volunteers around the country, available around the clock, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. With the help of their unique GPS technology and iconic ambucycles, United Hatzalah's average response time is less than 3 minutes across the country and a whopping 90 seconds in metropolitan areas. United Hatsalah's mission is to arrive at the scene of medical emergencies as soon as possible and provide the patient with professional medical aid until an ambulance arrives, which results in many lives being saved. So before we turn to our program and hear from our distinguished guests, two of our dear friends, Lisa and David, we're blessed to be joined by the founder of United Hatzalah, Eli Beer, one of the great guardians of the Jewish people. Eli's own inspiring battle with COVID represents the inspiring fighting spirit of this organization. Eli, we're so grateful that you are, Baruch Hashem, back to good health. Welcome, Eli.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with you, and I know a lot of you on the West Coast, but I know some people who are watching it in Israel or in other places, so thank you for being up so late. Last time we were all together, we were attacked, so we had to stop. And I was actually saying a beautiful story of what happened to me when I woke up from being in a respirator for a month, being in a coma. And I spoke about hearing a story about a United Hatzalah volunteer who received a call a few minutes before Passover about a woman, 90-year-old woman in Bat Yam, who called United Hatzalah, our 911 center. And our number in Israel is 1221. And she was crying and saying that she's in quarantine for over 2 months already. And she didn't go out of her house, but she said, the only thing I'm missing is candles, to light candles for the Chag, for Passover. And she was asking United Hatzalah if someone could give her candles. She has no candles to light for Pesach. And a United Hatzalah volunteer from Jaffa, Ibrahim, who's a Muslim volunteer, jumped on an ambucycle. This was 5 minutes before Pesach. And he went to the supermarket in Jaffa and he bought 2 candles. He bought a bouquet of flowers. And he drove over to her in Bat Yam, which is a few minutes away. And he knocked on a door on the 3rd floor. And he said to her, I was sent by United Hatzalah. He was wearing the orange vest we always wear. And he said, I was sent by United Hatzalah because you were missing candles. Here it is. Here's candles for Pesach. But I also got you flowers. And I want to give it to you for the Chag. And he wished her Chag Sameach. She started crying. And Ibrahim started crying. And he gave her a hug. And they were hugging each other. And he realized she had a number on her hand. And he couldn't get over this whole thing that he was helping a Holocaust survivor. Ibrahim is a United Hatzalah volunteer, one of 6,000, who's dedicated his life to save other people. And after I heard his story, and I just woke up after Passover in a Miami hospital, I couldn't get over the story. And I said, I want to speak to Ibrahim. And they put me on the phone with him. And he told me the story. And I said to him, how did you get to volunteer in Hatzalah? He said, I was injured 5 years ago in a terrible accident when I was driving my truck near Ramle, which is near the airport. And I was in a serious condition, but Hatzalah volunteers, United Hatzalah volunteers saved my life. And a year after I recovered, it took a long time for him to recover. I became a Hatzalah volunteer myself. But after the story with this woman that I helped her only with a simple thing, getting her candles for Passover and buying her flowers, it changed my life forever. And I will be a volunteer till the rest of my life at United Hatzalah. And the reason I'm saying this story is because that gave me the motivation to fight for my recovery and get out of bed and start walking and go back to Israel and continue the life-saving mission I have for the rest of my life. So today, 6,000 volunteers in Israel who are helping people in heart attacks and strokes and car accidents and any event that they have are busy, not only with the regular things that we're busy with, but also with COVID patients that we have every day. More and more people are getting sick in Israel. We have a peak now of over 2,000 people who are getting sick today in Israel. We had a beautiful time of a few weeks that Israel looked like it's over. The COVID is over in Israel. But unfortunately, it came back, and now it's in the peak of it, and over 2,000 people a day. So the army, the IDF actually took over the whole responsibility of dealing with COVID because it's a security for Israel, this whole situation now. And we have tens of thousands of people who are sick now. And all the transports of COVID patients are done by United Hatzalah. Not only by us, by also all the ambulance services in Israel. They have over 100 ambulance companies in Israel who are under one umbrella with United Hatzalah, and we are actually the ones dispatching all of them to transport people. These people, some of them are getting sick in their homes, and we had a case just yesterday with a family of 9. The father and son got sick, but all the rest of the family were fine. And they had a small apartment of 3 bedrooms, and they couldn't stay in the same place. They had nowhere to quarantine. It's a big family. So we had to rush a team to them to get them out of there right away before the whole family gets sick. One of the kids has a terrible asthma situation that if that kid would have gotten sick, who knows if the child would have survived. So we had to get the father and son out of there. And we're dealing with hundreds of people that we have to transport every day. So United Hatzalah is a volunteer organization that saves lives in a mission of 90 seconds. And we have volunteers everywhere, Jews and non-Jews, religious and secular, men and women throughout the country who do this as volunteers. So I'm grateful for all of you for supporting this organization, for actually partnering with all the life-saving work we do. And I want to thank you for joining tonight with Carolyn and all the great speakers like David Suissa and all of you are going to speak tonight. And thank you for continuous support of United Hatzalah. And I hope all of you not only continue, but know how important it is now to support even more than ever. So todah rabah to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the update, Ellie. We can see that United Hatzalah is truly working overtime to help save lives in Israel. And we're so happy that you're doing better. And thank you for being here with us tonight. So for the next part of the show, I would like to introduce our next co-hosts, Shannon and Jacob Zackary.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. We had a little mishap last time, and I think that it worked to our benefit. I think it underpinned why we need to be having discussions like this. And I think it also doubled our viewership. So it worked out.
And it allowed me to be here with you.
And it allowed my wife to be here. 2 hours later, my wife went into labor. So we now have our baby girl, Eva, joining us. And she wanted us to thank everybody for postponing the event so she can join. When Carolyn asked us to participate in today's event, we were ecstatic. Not just because she's so wonderful and we love Ellie, but because United Hatzalah is truly a rare organization that really directly serves so many people. They asked us to talk a little bit about our recent sponsorship. We did a day of life-saving, as they have dubbed it. And it was actually a gift from me to my wife on our first anniversary. And a day of life-saving, what it does is we essentially sponsored a full day's operational costs for United Hatzalah of Israel, where, there's an average cost daily, and we covered the cost. And essentially, we were directly responsible, if you will, for helping so many people through United Hatzalah. They get hundreds of calls a day, and a couple weeks thereafter, they sent us a brochure that showed us the names and services provided to all of the people who had been serviced by United Hatzalah that day. And we felt that it was a beautiful way to celebrate our union by helping so many other people in need, which is what United Hatzalah does on a daily basis. Very briefly, I was asked to talk about how United Hatzalah creates a unity between Jewish people and non-Jews. What you have is you've got, in some instances, a Hasidic Jew sitting side by side with a devout Muslim working together to save lives.
I think they froze.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I think they're frozen, but basically what he was saying, how Israel is really uniting people together. We are showing a beautiful side of Israel, and so I think we've lost him. But
I think Carolyn, I'll just add to what Jacob was saying before. Oh, here, Jacob, we lost you for part of it.
We're back.
Okay.
Just kidding.
It's so I don't know where I left
10
off.
seconds back.
Okay, so in that vein, it does promote it promotes being partners with everybody together. And so in that same vein, the Combat Anti-Semitism movement that the United Hatzalah organization has now partnered with is this nonpartisan global movement across all religions and faiths. Again, it's all people united to combat anti-Semitism across the world. So it fights anti-Semitism wherever it occurs. And it's focused on any individuals, organizations, or governments that openly express or support anti-Semitic views. or commit anti-Semitic acts. So it's a global fight against anti-Semitism. And United Hatzalah has partnered with them to do a project that promotes humanity in Israel and promotes a good view on Israel by submitting a series of movies that will reflect all of the good that Israel does. And these movies will be published to a contest that essentially gets these movies shared as much as possible around the world. So United Hatzalah is active in combating anti-Semitism, as all of us should always be.
And just to add to that briefly, United Hatzalah is an organization that does so much good for so many people around the world, regardless of race and religion. And so what better way to combat anti-Semitism by being exemplary and showing people who we are through an organization like United Hatzalah. When people look at this organization and they see that, you know, this is the good that we're doing for society as a whole, I think that that speaks volumes against the anti-Semitic tropes and the negative paradigms that are often spread about the Jewish people. So I wanted to share that. And without further ado, we're going to pass it back to Carolyn, who will give a proper introduction for Lisa and David.
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon and Jacob. For the next part of the program, I would like to introduce our experts for tonight. David Suissa, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Journal, and Lisa Daftari, award-winning investigative journalist, political analyst, and commentator who frequently appears on Fox News, CNN, NBC, Al Jazeera, Voice of America, and Sirius XM, focusing on foreign policy and counterterrorism. Please join me as we welcome David and Lisa for a conversation on the rise of anti-Semitism in 2020.
Thank you, Carolyn. Ellie, are you still there? Because when I heard Ellie speak, it made me feel like sharing something I wasn't planning to share, because everything I've been hearing so far about United Hatzalah is around the theme of emergency, which is really the core of what United Hatzalah does, is it responds to emergencies. And as an editor-in-chief of the Jewish paper, I can tell you right now that this theme of emergency has spread throughout the whole Jewish world. And so many Jewish institutions right now are in a state of emergency. It could be synagogues, schools, museums, community centers, federations. This is a societal and communal earthquake that we are going through right now in these pandemic times. And I just wanted to share with you that this feeling of emergency that comes out of the United Hatzalah has now spread throughout the whole Jewish world. So I'm kind of glad that we're bringing this up today, in particular, anti-Semitism. And I have to start, Lisa, with a confession, because I moved here from Montreal 40 years ago. I've met hundreds, if not thousands of non-Jews. And one of the most difficult things as a journalist covering anti-Semitism is I have to separate my own experience from what I read, right? So I have never met a Jew hater, ever. Now, it's possible that I met non-Jews who hate Jews, but I couldn't tell. Maybe they're silent anti-Semites. But of the thousands of non-Jews I've met, when I had an ad agency, I remember I would, leave early on Shabbat. And anytime it would be a non-Jewish client, and I would tell them, I gotta leave, they were always incredibly respectful. The only time I had a problem was with my Jewish clients, when I told them I had to leave early for Shabbat. I'm not saying this to downplay at all the problem, because in my business, the more trouble and the more bad news, the better we do. But I do want to start with this confession that I got to make a distinction between my own life and my own experiences and the stuff I read about and that we cover the Jewish Journal. Do you find something similar, Lisa?
Absolutely. And I actually have a unique, I think, experience because most people don't know that I'm Jewish. I have actually an Iranian secular last name that is most often the last name of Muslims. And, you know, I cover the Middle East, I cover terrorism. So most people think I'm a reformed Muslim who covers these subjects. And, you know, unfortunately, I should say, I was going to say fortunately, but unfortunately, it's been beneficial because people are more likely to hear you and believe you when you talk about the Middle East if you're not a Jew. And when you said that you never experienced Jew hating or you never met a Jew hater, I unfortunately have met too many. Whether it's because I'm in a room where people don't know that I'm Jewish, or if it's, I'll give you the best juxtaposition of things is that a few years ago, I think it was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, in the same week, a 13-year-old girl, Coptic Christian in Egypt, was killed walking home from school. And you see this outpour on my Facebook page, on my Twitter regarding this event. A couple days later, a 13-year-old girl, apples to apples, was stabbed in her own bedroom in the quote unquote settlements in Judea and Samaria. And there were crickets from many of those individuals who thought that it was, you know, they were so outraged by the 13-year-old Egyptian girl being killed, but yet, you know what, let's talk about this Jewish girl. Maybe she deserved it. Maybe the Palestinian guy, you know, maybe his anger is justified. There is no bigotry like anti-Semitism that is up for discussion the way that anti-Semitism is. You know, what if Deshaun Jackson or Nick Cannon or Mel Gibson had said something along the same lines about another ethnicity, another race? What would happen then? You know, it's cancel culture doesn't apply to those who are anti-Semites, who are Jew haters. And, you know, that's the unfortunate reality that we live in right now.
Lisa, let's start at 20,000 feet, maybe with one of the great questions of Jewish history. Why do people hate Jews? Why would they hate us? Just think about it, right?
Right.
Aren't we the last people you'd want to hate when you look at everything we've contributed to American society, from the social justice activists in the 60s, from helping create the NAACP, and the hundreds and thousands of examples of all we've given back to America? Why would they hate us?
You know, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to start off by saying, just by asking that question from one Jew to another, by looking insular and looking into ourselves and saying, what's the problem? That is a problem in and of itself, meaning we are always looking to give them or give ourselves the justification for hatred. And the bottom line, even though I will answer your question, the bottom line is that hatred has no justification. There's no logic. You can't talk yourself into anti-Semitism. You can't talk yourself out of anti-Semitism. And, you know, you ask yourselves why, and particularly right at this moment. Yes, there is an absolute rise. I mean, quantitatively, there is a rise in anti-Semitic events. But when qualitatively looking at anti-Semitic, we're living in a day and age where you cannot be audacious enough to assume someone's biological gender. It might offend them. It might offend them because you don't know what they want to live as, what they want to assign to themselves. But yet you can openly, you know, offend a Jew, and then there will be this discussion about it. Why? Well, let's look back at time. Well, there was the killing of Jesus, and then, you know, we kind of marginalized Jews at that point, and then we pushed them out of society, and then we realized that it was worse to push them out of society because then they picked up vocations that were only specific to Jews, like money lending or, you know, many other things. And they became so good at that, we decided, you know what, let's be nice to them, right? This was the time of Martin Luther. We wanted to be nice to them to bring them back into society. Well, that backfired because then they became so good at everything that, you know, then we started hating them again. And as Jews, we begin to think, well, maybe it's because we're too successful. Maybe it's because we go to too many Ivy League schools. Maybe it's because we win too many Nobel Peace Prizes in science and other things. Maybe it's because we own too much real estate. But the bottom line is, let me assure you, if we stop buying the real estate and we stop applying to Ivy League schools and we stop being successful, we will still be hated. And that is what time and each time period has shown us. And I think what everyone stops to say is when you talk about anti-Semitism right now as an emergency, to use your own word, people say, well, it's not like it's the Holocaust. But think back to the Holocaust. The morning of Kristallnacht, what did they think to themselves? Did this just spring up overnight? Did these feelings just happen? No, they were percolating under the surface for such a long time. And that is the emergency. That is the discussion we should be having. What is this leading up to?
You know, if anti-Semitism is going to be here no matter what, whether we're quiet or loud, whether we're successful or unsuccessful, whether we're right-wing or left-wing, whether we're religious or non-religious, whether we're engaged or not engaged with society, I wonder if we're kind of in the best possible situation now, because I'd rather be successful, and maybe the anti-Semitism we're going through right now is just the price we have to pay for success. And in the book by Tolushkin and Prager, there's a really well-known book, quite credible, on anti-Semitism many years ago. That was one of their theories, is picking up on what you said, Lisa, that, you know, we are hated because we are successful. And we're living at a time in America right now where successful people, powerful people, are not that popular. Right now, the great heroes in America are victims, right? And
Sure.
we just don't make the greatest victims.
Right.
And I'm wondering if we're kind of vulnerable to this kind of societal shift in America right now.
Right, but I think and I've said this to every Jewish group I speak to, I think the blessing and curse of the Jewish people is resiliency. You know, are all Jewish people successful? No, but you don't hear from the victims. You don't hear from the ones, because we're not victims. We've never, you know, whether you look at it on a micro or macro level, you didn't see the Jews of Germany or the rest of Europe leaving and wanting to bomb Europe. They left or they stayed and they moved on and they built and they built and they built. And that's why you have Israel, a country the size of New Jersey, with so many challenges in every sector. You know, they've built it to what it is today. Or whether you see, you know, Jews from the Middle East who were, you know, who left countries in the worst of shape, and they came to wherever it was, whether it's Europe or Canada or the United States or Mexico, and they built and they built and they built. Are a lot of Jews, you know, per capita successful? Yes, but that just speaks to, you know, the attributes of the Jewish community. Again, not playing into victimhood, you know.
And that includes Israel.
It includes Israel, 100%.
Israel is a classic success story.
Right, and the thing with Jews is that we are a minority with a majority mentality, meaning if you look at the number of Arabs, for example, versus the number of Jews, well, the David and Goliath story is completely flipped on its head, right? But yet, when you look at intersectionality, meaning, you know, social justice movements of our time, if you are, you know, if you're anti-bigotry against gays, against blacks, against women, well, then you also have to hate Israel. That's what they basically feed into this mentality. Well, if you really want to look at who the victim is in that equation, it's Israel. But this also, it's a whole different discussion about the PR game and how Israel, you know, we're not victims, which is a wonderful thing. We're resilient people. But yet again, that means we lose the PR war over and over again. People don't realize what kind of humanitarian work that Israel does, whether it's, you know, in Africa, it's in Latin America. They come in after Hurricane Katrina. They come in after 9/11. They even offered help to Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, after the earthquake that they had a few years ago. But again, Israel loses this PR war, because this is what we think we have to do. Of course, we have to be humanitarian, but that allows others to take advantage of this idea or this false narrative that Israel is the aggressor and the Palestinians are the victims here. Now, why do I even, you know, one thing that I want to say off the bat is that two issues that we as Jews ourselves allow to distract from talking about anti-Semitism the way that we should is that that it's a left-wing, right-wing, Republican, Democrat issue. It's not. You see it on both sides. And you start to pick at it and micro and say, well, it was under Obama or it was under Trump, you lose. We are already such a minority that we cannot afford to break it down further than that. And secondly, it's to say that, well, it's Israel versus Jewish thing, meaning you can be anti-Israel and not be anti-Jewish. No, you cannot. You know, the Maduro regime in Venezuela is horrific, but how many times a day do you hear people saying that they're anti-Venezuelan? Best example is that the Iranian regime is the most horrific regime. How many times have you heard people saying, oh, I'm anti-Iranian, I love the people, but I can't stand the regime? People who say that they're anti-Israel, but they're not anti-Jewish, ask them how much they know about Israel politics. What do they even know about what goes on in Israel day in and day out? They're not that.
Frozen? Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. So what's the best way to fight it? So we have many things, options in front of us. The obvious option is always to call out, condemn. And this is the Anti-Defamation League, and in the news media, we hear that all the time, to call out. Who are the best people to call out anti-Semitism, Jews or non-Jews? It was a thing by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, wrote a piece that went viral, unbelievable. Charles Barkley. They got to my children. They made such big news by having blacks condemn blacks against anti-Semitism. Is that a direction you see that has more potential for success?
Absolutely. And I've always said, you know, Jews we're so fragile and vulnerable in the way of finding partners and allies that we'll take them wherever we can find them. And particularly now, you know, there's two ways of looking at this. People look at someone like, you know, Deshaun Jackson or Nick Cannon and say, oh, they're just uninformed. They're just being silly. They're naive. Let me reassure you that when someone of that celebrity status tweets out, you know, it's a nice sunny day today, let me tell you that that tweet has to be okayed by their agents. It passes through so many filters that they must, my point is, they must truly feel this so deeply in order to share it on a platform. Musicians rarely share their political beliefs unless they think so strongly about it. Right now, obviously, there's a lot of anti-Trump sentiments in Hollywood, for example, but you usually don't, we're also living in unprecedented times, but you usually don't see fashion designers or Hollywood or these high caliber celebrities pick a side or to offend a certain segment of the population for fear of losing support of any kind. So, you know, I think when you do find those individuals who are willing to be partners with us, who are willing to call out hatred, we need to celebrate them. We need to bring them in as speakers. We need to, you know, retweet, post, share information, engage with these individuals, and to show them that we appreciate them speaking out on our behalf. It's not whether they're Jews or non-Jews. You know, a lot of times, I know, and I'm guilty of this myself more recently than ever before, we as Jews are fearful to speak out, and that's because there's a backlash. You know, you don't see members of the African-American community as worried of the backlash. You don't see members of the gay community or women's rights or any other rights as fearful of the backlash as you do with Jews. And that only speaks to the comfort with which people express their anti-Jewish sentiments. And that just also speaks to how much work we have to do as Jews. Again, I bring myself in and out all the time. Like you said, we look at this from above as you know, as journalists, and then down on the ground as Jews. So it just speaks to how much more work we have to do.
There's another movement happening right now in America, the anti-America movement, that goes beyond just anti-Trump. And I wrote recently that because Jews, whether we're Democrat or Republican, Jews are seen as quintessentially American. So the anti-American movement that's spreading across America right now, which dismays me to no end because I love this country, is bad for the Jews.
Oh, it's bad for everyone.
The more people hate America, the more they're going to hate us.
Oh, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Look, all the values that are currently being attacked are values that are so integral to the Jewish culture. It's family values and educational values, humanitarian values, I mean, all kinds of values. And I think that part of that is being informed enough, knowledgeable enough to call out hypocrisy where we see it. So for example, when you see a Jew hater, you ask them, you know, you're so concerned for the Palestinian people, or you're so, you know, you hate Jews so much. How about other issues in the Middle East? If you care so much about, you know, the Palestinians, how about the Syrian? How about the young Syrian women who are being gang raped all the, you know, from the time they're 9 years old? You know, how about the young, you know, the woman in Iran who is being imprisoned for not wearing her hijab or for posting on Instagram? You know, you have to call out hypocrisy where you see it. And it's not just social media. It's not just these social justice movements. We're seeing this in the media itself. Two of the biggest culprits of spreading anti-Semitism right now, and for spreading this anti-American, like you said, they go hand in hand, anti-American sentiment, are the universities and the media. And until they stop this, you know, it's an all-out war on the institutions that we know and we subscribe to. This is going to continue. It's going to continue on and on.
Lisa, you meant the media except for Jewish Journal, correct? Okay,
and the
good.
foreign desk.
And the foreign desks. So let's pivot to Israel. All right. Obviously, you know, Jews and the Jewish state are completely intertwined. You can't separate us. But there are a lot of things going on right now within Israel and in the region. Obviously, Israel has had the brand of Israel in America has taken a beating in recent years. But now there are things happening. For example, Israel has created a reconnection with some of the Arab countries, like the Gulf states, like Saudi Arabia and so forth, including Egypt. And there's a sense that the region needs Israel now because of water technology, because of cybersecurity, because of the joint interest to fight off Iran and the whole Shiite hegemony. So, but at the same time, we have discussion of, you know, annexing territory in the West Bank, the connection between Bibi and Trump, who is not liked very much in America by a big part of the population. So there's like pros and cons going on. Can you talk about how this, you think, is going to impact the situation of anti-Semitism in America, what Israel does, and moving forward?
This is something I think we assign to again, to justify why anti-Semitism happens, why Jew hating happens. It's a lame excuse. Most people who hate Jews don't even know that annexation is going on or that it's a topic of the times. If they do know about it, ask them what the history is behind it. Or how about the peace plan? Ask them, what is the peace plan all about? Do you even know about it? It was dead on arrival to Palestinians and so much of the media without even looking at it. Well, it can't be fair. It came from the Trump White House, the anti-Semitic Trump White House that has done, I mean, love them or hate them, the Trumps, Jared Kushner. I've actually been invited to the White House several times to work on the peace plan. I know all of the details of the peace plan. I was part of the rollout of the peace plan. It was so incredibly, you know, such an incredible deal and opportunity for the Palestinians to grow economically, to have for future generations, etc. So when someone talks about, well, it's because of annexation, it is because of Bibi's hawkish stance. People like that, again, they're not entitled to an opinion about Israel when they know very minimal. Or how about moving of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? Do people even know where these places are on a map? Those people who have such strong opinions about these issues, again, it becomes pretext for hatred. And again, there's no logistical backup for hatred.
And we're also dealing with the Twitter world, where most people create a perception that only takes 2 or 3 seconds. In the world of 2 or 3 seconds, we don't do very well at all, because in 2 or 3 seconds, then Palestinians are the poor, oppressed victims. They're the underdogs. They deserve my sympathy. Israel is big, successful, powerful, and white. So in the world of 3 seconds, we don't do well at all. No. And I think this is kind of part of the reality that you're talking about. And I wonder if it's the kind of condition we have to, learn to live with and figure out, like you said, it's part of the challenge of resiliency, is to kind of soldier on, recognizing that we will never be able to please all the people all the time. You know what I'm saying, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean,
the price we pay.
I think, look, you're absolutely right in saying, look, ask the majority of Jews, are we willing to exchange our successes for, a day in the life of a victimized Palestinian? No, we're not. But at the same time, could we be more cognizant to the world around us? Could we face the realities that there is a media bias, that the IDF has to work better with the media to send out more pictures, more stories? And I'm not, this is not the first time I'm saying this. I've said this to the IDF many times, like, help me to help you tell the story better. A lot of times the IDF is very reluctant to release a lot of information. They don't want to look like they're the victims. Again, this is part of the secret to our success, and I understand that, but we also have to evolve with the times, and especially right now, especially with this devolving of what we know, in a it's not even pre-COVID, pre-Trump, I don't know, or pre-Obama. You can draw the line at any point in the times, but we've definitely seen an evolution over the last decade where we have to answer to a lot of, like so many Jews answer to the hashtag Jewish privilege accusation. Let people know the reality. Whenever I have the opportunity, I tell people the reality of, for example, Iranian Jews are extremely successful for the most part, but they've also overcome tremendous obstacles. Many of them have overcome tremendous obstacles. They're very colorful stories, like the Jews of Syria, like the Jews of Iraq, like the Jews of Europe, of course, overcoming, World War II, the Holocaust, and moving on and moving on. Just like these stories are told here in the United States with first generation, second generation American Jews from various backgrounds, so too can Israel play in this game. There's certain places where I feel Jews have made the decision to surrender their position. The media, for example, except for the Jewish Journal and the Foreign Desk, of course. You look at the universities. There are actual universities where Jewish kids are told, you might not want to apply there. It might not be such a quote unquote, Jewish friendly campus. And unless you're that belligerent, outspoken kid at age of 18, maybe you don't want to go and face that day in and day out. It boils your blood. I do what I do because I attended one of those campuses, and I thought I was going to go to law school, and I was like, no, you know what? I want to spend the rest of my life debating these issues because I was faced with that adversity. And I think that we need to, again, go back to, yes, we are resilient. Yes, we are strong. Yes, we will hold our heads up high, and we'd rather be the bigger person. But we also have to go back to telling these stories and sharing with the media what we do. Quick little anecdote for you is I used to travel to Israel, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 5 times a year, whether it was work or personal or whatever. It just happened that I was there that often. And on one of the trips, I was able to connect with Shabak, the Shin Bet, and be able to be taken into Syria and to do some investigative reporting there, etc. One of the stops that I made was at the Ziv Hospital. This is on the border of Syria and Israel. And as somebody who's not only Jewish, but going to Israel this many times a year and covering the war, whether it's in Syria, on the Syrian side or in Israel, for so many years, I didn't know the extent of this. I knew that Israel was treating, whether it's at Hadassah Hospital or Ziv or Sheba, they're treating, Palestinians, they're treating Syrians, etc. But what I got to see up close, you would never in your mind believe what I saw. One interview that I did was with an actual ISIS fighter. He was an actual commander. He had a hole in his leg the size or maybe larger than a tennis ball. You could see through his leg. He was shot by a sniper, and Israel brought him in to treat him. I was able to interview him, and I said to him, what did you think of Israelis before you came here? He said, I thought they had horns and tails. I said, what do you think of them now that they saved your life? He said, I think they have horns and they have tails. And these are the stories that if you hadn't seen this up close, you'd never believe it. And Israel is not telling these stories.
You're saying it makes no difference.
It makes no difference. But you know what? my point is, it makes no difference, yet we can't surrender these spaces either, whether it's the media, the universities. We can do our share in telling more of these stories and defending Israel and Jews more.
You know, I spent 4 days in Guatemala with Israel Aid, and I tell you, it made a difference because they're seeing these Jews from Israel living in villages just to help them overcome a disaster from the volcano. But I want to pivot to the Democratic Party. Are you concerned with where the Democratic Party is going right now? They're shaping their platform from Israel, and we hear a lot about some of the, you know, far left forces within the Democratic Party, and whether it's AOC, Ilhan Omar, or Shiva Tlaib. And are you concerned about that when it comes to?
Sure. I think most level-headed Democrats are concerned about where the party's going, whether it's the infiltration of the march by elements like Linda Sarsour or Louis Farrakhan, or if it's the trio of women who are incredibly hateful towards Israel, towards Jews. I mean, in the year 2020, we have such elements within our political infrastructures. It's mind-boggling to think that anybody hates. I mean, we're living in a time where we're trying to equalize everything.
And yet the great majority of American Jews vote Democrat, including my dear friend Sam Yebri. So how do you explain that? How do you reconcile what you just said about what's happening in the Democratic Party with the fact that so many Jews vote Democrat?
Sam Yebri is a good friend, and he's one of the smartest Jews I know. So I know. Him. Yeah, well, I think, and I don't want to speak for him, but I'm going to speak about Jews in general. Sam, why do you vote Democrat? No, I don't want to to put you on the spot, but if you care to share,
I will share one. Not that answer, but the question of should all Democrats leave the Democratic, all Jews leave the Democratic Party, which is raised, right? But think about the implication of that is ceding the Democratic Party to people, a rising number of people who view Israel differently from us and are very critical. Jews who are on the Democratic side, who are pro-Israel, should stay and fight and make sure that this party, going back to Truman, which has had, in a bipartisan way, been pro-Israel. I think the answer is not leaving it, but fighting for a U.S.-Israel relationship that we all support.
Right. Amen. So I do appreciate that a lot, because, I think that Sam's right in saying if they surrender, the entire party would be taken. Well, this is what I think. I think there's a huge sweep, right? So there are most, I should say, seasoned politicians, whether they're on the right or on the left, are just that. They're seasoned politicians. They don't hate. They love America, Democrats as well as Republicans. And I think that this frenzy of these young women that have come in and hate America has basically hijacked the party to a huge extent. And I'll leave it to people like Sam to stay there and to attempt to correct it. But I'll also say this. I know individuals, women, who met with the organizers of the Women's March and said, listen, want to support you, and obviously this is our agenda as much as it is yours, but you need to do away with and denounce influences like Linda Sarsour and Louis Farrakhan and the likes. And they promised in the meeting, and then they went back on their word, which shows us that it's such a huge part of their platform, just like Black Lives Matters. I mean, it's so important to say these issues matter to us, but why can't I, feel comfortable saying Black lives absolutely matter to me, but Black Lives Matters as a movement means nothing to me, because they hate Jews. They hate half this country because they voted for this president. They want to defund the police. They call Israel an apartheid state, and the list goes on and on. And I bring this up as an example because, when I don't have to eat from this tree just because some of the apples are poisoned. It's our job, whether you're left or right. Again, you cannot, separate the two and say, well, anti-Semitism is only going on the right or only going on the left, but to say, I will root it out, I will call it out wherever I see it. And, it's, you fight not with knowledge. And, ask Ilhan Omar how the gay parade is in Somalia, because the one in Tel Aviv is absolutely fantastic. When they stand up and say Israel does X, Y, and Z, I mean, where's the backlash to say, what have you done for the people of your country? What have you done for women? What have you done for Muslim women who are being mutilated and being, sold off into marriage at age 9? So
I think one of the complications with Black Lives Matter that so many of us have overlooked is there's an enormous difference between the slogan, Black Lives Matter, which has now become one of the most popular slogans in US social justice history, which organizations from Nike to you name it are putting it all their websites. It is ubiquitous across the country, whether it's on a court for the NBA or so forth. A difference between that really popular slogan and the organization, which has such a strong anti-Semitic and anti-Israel streak. And I think this is why so many Jews are in a difficult position, because they don't want to look like they're going against the slogan.
Right.
But we have to really make that distinction. And once you establish that you're going after the organization, then we have an obligation to expose them for who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
And again,
sorry to interrupt.
How much time do you have, Caroline?
So, yeah, just for the purpose of time. So I'm so sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure we have enough time to ask any questions. Thank you so much, David and Lisa, for this really insightful discussion so far. I just want to throw it off to Jacob now, just so we can get a few questions answered, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Hi, guys. Well, first and foremost, Lisa and David, you guys did such a phenomenal job answering, touching upon so many relevant topics that so many of the questions that have been posed, you guys preemptively addressed. And personally, I want to say that it gives me pride to see two individuals such as yourselves speak so eloquently and passionately about such an important topic. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of the people who are affected by the ugliness of anti-Semitism. Secondly, just briefly to touch upon this, I know that Sam was somewhat picked on. I want to say that if we had more Democrats like Sam in office, we would have a better Democratic Party. I personally am nonpartisan. And I think that just because a certain constituency has a misunderstanding and misrepresents a particular a portion of a demographic, doesn't mean that we should leave them alone and allow them to continue to do that. I think that for that reason, we have more of a need for people to get into that party and help lead change. So I wanted to address that briefly. We have so many questions here, and so we have so little time. So I want to limit the questions that have been posed. You guys talked about this a bit, Lisa and David, but we want to just touch upon this a little bit more. We look at what recently happened with George Floyd and what that led into, and it, much like the Women's March and other causes, was hijacked and somehow commingled with anti-Jewish and anti-Israel sentiment. We had Mohammed Hadid, who posted, and then deleted the thing on Instagram, talking about how the United States takes cues on how to mistreat its people from Israel. So why is it, and I don't know that you can give us a full and satisfactory answer, I don't know if anyone can, but why is it that people tend to continuously take things out on the Jews? And why is it that these causes get hijacked and turn into anti-Israel sentiment? What does BLM have to do with the BDS movement? So if you could briefly elaborate on that for us and what you think and what you recommend.
Yeah, so it was interesting because they for a long period of time said that this police officer learned how to kneel on George Floyd's neck from Israel. And what if they had learned that technique just because they abused it? Well, how can you blame Israel? It's like blaming the spoon because you're fat. They took advantage of that. And where is the accountability of someone who took advantage? It was later revealed that Minnesota never even got any training by Israel like other places did. And, Israel defended itself. But, who's going to hear the follow-up? Just like, remember the Goldstone report? It was like, here's a bashing of Israel, but now we're going to correct it. And then who's listening anymore?
Yeah.
It's so deeply ingrained, whether you want to look back at the killing of Jesus all the way through the Black Plague, through everything is blamed on the Jews, and that becomes the easy target. And then you can talk about why are we the easy target? Is it because we have surrendered and all the things that David mentioned? Do we just give up and say, this is the way it's going to be? I think it's time, and given the current political climate in the United States and the social justice climate in the United States, it's time for Jews to speak up. We're not going to loot, we're not going to protest, we're not going to riot, no. But we do have the space, the time, and if we're resilient the way that we say that we are, then that resiliency should now translate into defending the Jewish people and making our social justice mark on this time period as well. If everyone else is holding up their card, it's time for us to hold ours up as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that, Lisa. And I hope that answers the questions that some folks asked. David, you mentioned very precisely that the brand of Israel has taken a beating in the United States. Now, I personally happen to know that countries like Qatar and other countries are investing billions of dollars into the United States to create and perpetuate a negative outlook on Israel. As well, and about Israel in the United States, and particularly with respect to the U.S. education system. Now, while we can write off, the students as being uninformed, as Paul, one of our viewers, posed this question, he said, "What about the faculty? Why do they contribute to the validation of falsehoods and fomenting anti-Semitism?" If you could please address that for us.
Well, as I'm mentioning earlier, we're living at a time right now where the real heroes are poor, powerless victims, and Israel doesn't fit that narrative. Israel is seen as very strong, very powerful, very successful, Western, almost colonialist, and also seen as white. Almost a sense of white privilege. People don't realize how multicultural Israel is, including the Sephardic Jews like me. So we have two strikes against us from the very beginning. And right now, 80 to 90% of the professors on college campuses are the progressive world that is not very pro-Israel. It's kind of the nature of the beast right now. And I'm not the kind to kind of throw my hands up in the air. I don't want to give up because I see the facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground is that Israel is an amazing country. There are very few countries that do more for Israel and that do more for the world than Israel does. And even I remember, like in Pico Robertson, I once saw Hatzalah help a non-Jew. I saw Hatzalah help a Black. So many Jews help non-Jews. There's so much about the Jews and about Israel. If we could kind of wrap up this whole show on a positive note, I cannot overstate the extent of humanitarianism that happens in the Jewish world, including Israel. If you look at Israel, the freest Arabs in the Middle East, the ones that have the most amount of opportunities, most amount of freedom of speech, most amount of freedom of religion, live in Israel. I used to be a Jew in an Arab country, and I got to tell you, I didn't have a fraction of the rights that Arabs have in Israel. So we can find some consolation in the fact that the facts on the ground are so much with us, whether it's the Jews in America who fight for social justice, or whether it's Israel who spreads around the world trying to do humanitarian work.
Wonderful. You make incredible points. Thank you for addressing that for us. There are a few other questions. Shannon, would you like to share one of those?
Sure. One from
We have-
Richard.
Sorry,
One-
just we have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, so I mean, which one? I don't know. Go ahead. Choose one.
Okay, I'll ask a question that was presented earlier. The question is, can we trust the numbers? Lisa, you mentioned earlier that qualitatively, certainly the anti-Semitic acts have gotten worse. And quantitatively, we want to ask a question. We want to know, can we trust the numbers, or is it simply that organizations and police are now taking the calls that they would normally ignore in the past more seriously? Are there really more anti-Semitic incidents happening? Or is the media just reporting more to support, a narrative perhaps?
Yeah, no, I would think it's the opposite. I would think that that number is incredibly underreported. And I think that many anti-Semitic incidents are not reported. Right here in our community on Beverly Boulevard, there was a synagogue that was, there was graffiti, vandalism during the Black Lives Matters protests. And, someone was there, right, someone sent it, and I basically tweeted it, and from there, about 20 publications quoted my tweet, meaning this was not picked up by any media that went there themselves, meaning they picked it up from me, and I am media, I get that, but where's the mainstream media with regards to being there, covering this, and showing this aspect of it? Look, there was a rabbi who was hunted down and killed at a home Hanukkah party in Muncie, New York, just this past winter. You didn't even hear about this. It's internally that we talk about these stories. But how about if that were a Black man, a priest, an imam? It sounds like a joke, but how about if there were anything but a Jewish rabbi who was killed in that home? There would have been riots, there would have been protests, there would have been much more than you heard about, than the 5 Jewish publications picking that up.
So it's actually happening. There are more.
It's happening more than we know. And the numbers, look, the numbers are, they show a huge surge, exponential increase in the number of incidents. And I will add this, the 5 states with the highest number of incidents, you'd be shocked. It's not Alabama, it's not Tennessee, it's not Kentucky. It's New York, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, in that order. The states that probably pride themselves on being the most tolerant, the most, urban, the most, they happen to also be blue states that are, concerned with social justice movements, which we appreciate, but let our issue be part of the list of issues that they're concerned about.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa.
We haven't brought up yet, which I think is a huge issue, is unlike the old generations, there's this thing in today's world that we didn't have. It's called social media. It's an extraordinary, potent instrument to express your hatred, your bigotry, and so forth. And sometimes you can hide behind anonymity. So we can't forget how that instrument has been used in the fight, in the rise of anti-Semitism. Although at the same time, I can tell you that the same instrument is fighting back. My daughter did a video. I'm pushing my daughter here. She did a video against anti-Semitism. She says, here are these rock stars that I grew up with, these rap stars that I love, and she names them all. And she did a whole 15-minute cry of the heart, and it went viral on Instagram. So at the same time that the haters have a bigger instrument, the people who fight the haters also have the same instrument. And we just make sure we get more guys fighting the good fight.
And if I may, Carolyn, I know we want to wrap up. If you allow me 60 seconds,
sure.
I just want to share one of the things that I really took away from today's dialogue. David, you said, you asked, what can we do? What has been effective in fighting anti-Semitism? And you said that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got to my kids, and having other non-Jewish, if you will, celebrities speak up has been impactful. And if that's something that we can try to, help promote more of. Empirical data shows that it's effective. And personally, I just want to say this, we asked the question of why anti-Semitism, no matter what we do. Lisa was elaborating on, no matter what we do, there's anti-Semitism. And personally, I want to give my answer, and I want to say that perhaps this is an impetus for us to embody what it means to be a Jew, which is to consistently strive to be better, to do better, to lead the fight for truth, and all along remain strong and vigilant. With that, I want to pass it to Carolyn to wrap this up for us.
Thank you, Jacob. So ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program. Thank you so much to our co-hosts and Lisa and David for a really informative discussion. We've learned the importance of United Hatzalah and that it showcases the best of Israel and defies any mischaracterizations. United Hatzalah is about being inclusive, being together, and not caring about where you're from, and most importantly, having one mission, and that's saving lives. We aim to be first on the scene, and we're 100% free. I'll be following up with all of you and providing you details on different ways to get more involved. And if you're inspired by the work tonight of United Hatzalah and you'd like to support us, please contact me. Thank you all so much for joining us and making this event so meaningful and successful. I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank
you,
you.
David, Lisa, Sam, Leah.
Thank you all.